Sparta, the name that put fear and respect into all the adversaries that stood against the warriors of Lacedaemon. This famed city-state rose to prominence during the archaic and classical periods of ancient Greece, becoming synonymous with the discipline, military prowess, and glory, studied and admired by the generations to this day. In the first episode of Ancient Sparta, we go through its earliest phase, the Mycenaean period of the Bronze Age, and the legendary foundations of this celebrated city.
Where do we begin?
According to the archaeological evidence, the earliest human habitations in the area of Laconia dates to the Middle Neolithic period. These early settlers were based on the small farming communities and used caves for burials and cult purposes. The population of early Laconia remained scarce and relatively stagnant until the establishment of a new dominant tribe on the Peloponnese. This new tribe were the Achaeans, the early Greek speakers that established themselves in the area of Argolis during the end of the 3rd and the beginning of 2nd millennium BCE. Over the next several centuries, the Achaeans would spread from Argolis to Laconia and further to Messenia, where they founded their own settlements and gradually assimilated the indigenous farmers into their own society. According to the ancient Greek historians, the original inhabitants of Laconia prior to the Achaean arrival were called the Lelegoi or Lelegs, after their mythical eponymous ruler, Lelex. In Greek mythology, Lelex was succeeded by his son Myles, who was in turn succeeded by his son Eurotas, by whom the river Eurotas was called. As King Eurotas had no male successors, he married his daughter Sparta to the Achaean hero and son of Zeus, Lacedaemon, signifying the transfer of Laconia from the Lelegs into the hands of the Achaeans. The new king Lacedaemon named the kingdom after himself, while founding his new seat of power, the city he named after his wife, Sparta. Furthermore, the nearby mountain range Taygetus was also said to have been named after Lacedaemon's mother, Taygete. This founding myth of Sparta would persist throughout the entirety of its history, as the name of the Spartan city-state was indeed Lacedaemon. Its citizens, which we today know as the Spartans, were the ancient Greeks known as the Lacedaemonians, while the name Sparta referred to its main settlement on the banks on the Eurotas River. The original settlement was constructed in the early to mid-15th century BCE, centered around the mansion consisting of 3 parallel units, with the Megaron building being in the middle. The Mycenaean Sparta was much smaller than the usual palace centers, such as Tiryns, Pylos, Thebes, and others, signifying that Laconia of the Bronze Age likely did not constitute a major center of its own, but was rather under the sway of the Achaean capital, Mycenae. Therefore, the list of the mythological Spartan kings of the Mycenaean era was likely based on the local rulers rather than the actual independent sovereigns. Furthermore, these rulers probably did fit the title of Basileus, which in these early times did not signify an actual king, but rather a local chieftain. After the construction of the original Megaron, the building was soon destroyed, likely by an earthquake, as there is no evidence of either fire or political turbulence at the time. Immediately afterwards, another similar building was constructed on approximately the same spot, which was itself abandoned several decades later in favor of yet another, third mansion, likely a permanent seat of the Spartan rulers. According to the mythological accounts, Lacedaemon was succeeded by his son Amyclas. King Amyclas was credited with founding of the city of Amyclae, which would later remain as one of the main Achaean settlements in Laconia throughout the Dark Ages and well into the Achaean period. Amyclas was succeeded by his elder son Argalus, who was after a presumably short reign in turn succeeded by his younger brother Kinortas. Not many details are known about Kinortas either, other than the existence of his tomb, which survived into the historical period, being located in the proximity of the Skias, a gathering place of the classical Sparta, built around the 5th century BCE. The successor of Kinortas was said to have been Oibalus, who was, according to the mythology, either Kinortas's or Argalus's son. Oibalus was contemporary to the Mycenaean kings Electrion and Sthenelus, both sons of the legendary king and hero Perseus. Oibalus himself would go on to become Perseus's son-in-law, as he eventually married one of Perseus's daughters, Gorgophone. According to Pausanias, Gorgophone was one of the first women to marry twice, as she was originally married to the ruler of Messenia, Perieres. After the death of Perieres, Gorgophone married Oibalus. Now, the mythological sources are conflicting on whether Oibalus's children were by Gorgophone or by a nymph, Bateia, but either way, his sons were Tyndareus, Icarius, and Hippocone. Upon the death of Oibalus, he was succeeded by Tyndareus. This succession, however, did not sit well with Hippocone, who soon overthrew and exiled his brother and declared himself the Basileus of Sparta. Unfortunately for Hippocone, his reign was not to last, as he himself, together with his sons, were defeated and killed in an intervention by Heracles. As the result, the legendary hero restored Tyndareus on the Spartan throne, who then began his second reign. The second reign of Tyndareus would become even more famous than the first one, as the turbulence on the royal court of Mycenae greatly impacted Sparta as well. After the death of Heracles, the reigning king of Mycenae, Eurystheus, began the pursuit of Heracles' children, known as the Heraclidae. As Eurystheus was ultimately killed during his attack on Athens, the throne of Mycenae was left without a designated successor, and a civil war broke out. At first, the throne was taken by Atreus, who, after defeating Heracles' son Hylas, and then banishing his own brother Thyestes, declared himself the king of Mycenae. In the following conspiracy, however, Atreus was assassinated by Thyestes' son Aegisthus, who then enabled his father to seize the throne for himself. Subsequently, Atreus' own sons, Agamemnon and Menelaus, fled Mycenae and swore to continue the war with the help of their allies. In Sparta, Tyndareus ultimately sided with Agamemnon and Menelaus, receiving the brothers as royalty and providing them with support. In the subsequent events, the brothers would emerge victorious, and Agamemnon cemented his place as the king of Mycenae. One of Tyndareus' daughters, Clytemnestra, would be married to King Agamemnon, while his another daughter, Helen, who was considered to be the most beautiful woman in all of the known world, and in the mythological accounts the daughter of Zeus himself, would be contested by a number of suitors from all across the Mycenaean Greece. Ultimately, it was Agamemnon's brother Menelaus that received the hand of Helen. Furthermore, King Agamemnon would even convince Tyndareus to step down as the Basileus, and thus Menelaus became the new ruler of Sparta. The early reign of Menelaus was relatively firm and stable, as he assisted his brother in consolidating the Mycenaean power throughout the declining Bronze Age Greece. And the following events, however, the Greek world would come to be in a shock, as a seemingly insignificant visit from the Trojan delegation resulted in the Trojan prince Paris abducting Menelaus' wife Helen and escaping back to Troy. This abduction would in the Greek mythology serve as the cause for the outbreak of the legendary Trojan War, traditionally dated to have taken place from 1194 to 1184 BCE. In this war, all of Greece would join the supreme leadership of Agamemnon, and the city of Troy would ultimately be destroyed and burned to the ground. From this point on, the general decline of the Mycenaean Greece followed as a part of the late Bronze Age collapse, plagued by the internal instability, external threats of the migrating peoples, and the widespread economic collapse that ended a number of great civilizations of the Bronze Age. In Greece, the Mycenaean palace centers such as Mycenae, Thebes, Pylos, Iolkos, and a number of others were destroyed, and although Mycenae was partially rebuilt and continued to serve as an Achaean center together with the nearby Tiryns, the Mycenaean world was ever shrinking and clearly on its last legs. In Sparta, the ancient tradition has it that after returning home with Helen, Menelaus witnessed yet another civil war, where after his brother Agamemnon was assassinated in Mycenae, Agamemnon's son Orestes ultimately emerged as the new ruler of the declining Mycenae. As Menelaus and Helen had no male successors, upon their death Orestes incorporated Sparta into his own realm. From this period on, the general decline was more than apparent throughout Laconia, as most of the Achaean population either moved to what was left of the still remaining palace centers or migrated overseas as a part of the colonial expeditions. The site of the Mycenaean Sparta was ultimately abandoned. The old residence of Menelaus and Helen, which became known as the Menelaion, was turned into a shrine dedicated to the legendary couple, with what was remaining of the surrounding settlement becoming a backwater town known as Therapne. By 1100 BCE, the last Mycenaean ruler, Orestes' son Tisamenes, died in a battle against the returning Heraclidae, which resulted in the definite end of the Mycenaean era, beginning of the Greek Dark Ages, and the gradual rise on Dorians on the Peloponnese at the expense of the Achaeans. the Dorian settlers would arrive to Laconia as well, eventually giving rise to the Dorian Sparta, a topic that we will surely cover in the next episodes of the Spartan history. Please consider subscribing and sharing the video, as this is a one-person production and it greatly helps the visibility of the channel. Special thanks to History with Sai, Nico, Panayotis Yiannopoulos, Fred Leckie, and Estate Care for their continuous support. If you wish to become a Patreon member, please click the link in the video description. This was WanaxTV, and we'll see you again soon.